Welcome to Lakers News Fan Report, your home for the most exclusive updates, breaking news, and in-depth analysis on our beloved Los Angeles Lakers. I've been tracking something that's been building beneath the surface of the NBA landscape, something that could fundamentally reshape not just our franchise, but the entire balance of power in the Western Conference. And I need you to stay with me through every word of this video, because what I'm about to share represents the kind of opportunity that only comes around once in a generation. You know, there are moments in Lakers history that define eras. Magic and Kareem, Shaq and Kobe, LeBron and AD. These partnerships didn't just win championships, they created dynasties, they built legacies, they cemented Los Angeles as the premier destination in professional basketball. And right now, as we speak, there's a situation developing across the league that could give us the chance to add another legendary pairing to that list. A situation that involves one of the most dominant players on the planet, a two-time MVP who's currently averaging over 30 points and 10 rebounds per game, while shooting an absolutely ridiculous 64% from the field. But before we get into the specifics, I need to paint the picture of where we are as an organization right now. The Lakers are in a fascinating position. We've got LeBron James still performing at an elite level, defying age and expectations. We've got Anthony Davis, when healthy, being one of the most impactful two-way players in the league. We've got young talent like Austin Reeves, who's developed into a legitimate contributor. But here's the reality that nobody wants to talk about. Our championship window with this core is not infinite. LeBron's not getting any younger. And if we're serious about maximizing this opportunity, if we're serious about bringing banner number 18 to Crypto.com Arena, we need to be aggressive. We need to be bold. We need to be willing to make the kind of move that separates good organizations from legendary ones. And that's where this story gets absolutely fascinating. Because there's a player in the Eastern Conference right now who's been having conversations about his future, a player who's given everything to his current organization but is starting to wonder if there's a better path forward. A player who, according to multiple league insiders, has been the subject of intense speculation as the February 5th trade deadline approaches. A player whose combination of size, skill, and athleticism is virtually unmatched in today's NBA. I'm talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek Freak, a 7-footer who moves like a guard, dominates like a center, and impacts the game in ways that few players in history ever have. And here's what's got the entire basketball world buzzing right now. His future with the Milwaukee Bucks is legitimately uncertain. According to NBA insider Jake Fisher, Antetokounmpo told at least one teammate this summer that he believed a trade was virtually complete. Now, that deal didn't happen, but the fact that those conversations were taking place tells you everything you need to know about where his head is at. And it gets even more interesting. ESPN's Shams Charania has reported that Giannis and his agent are actively having conversations with Milwaukee about whether his best fit is staying with the Bucks or pursuing a move elsewhere. Think about that for a second. We're not talking about some disgruntled role player or an aging veteran looking for one last payday. We're talking about a two-time MVP, a Finals MVP, a player who's been the face of the Bucks franchise for over a decade, openly discussing whether it's time to move on. That's seismic. Now, according to prediction markets, multiple teams are emerging as potential destinations for Giannis. The New York Knicks reportedly have about a 28% chance of acquiring him. The San Antonio Spurs, who could pair him with Victor Wembanyama in what would be an absolutely terrifying front-court combination, have about a 15% chance. And interestingly enough, the Bucks themselves still have the highest probability at around 29% of keeping him past the trade deadline. But here's what nobody's talking about enough. The Los Angeles Lakers are very much in this conversation. Let me be clear about something right up front. The Lakers pulling off a trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo would be incredibly difficult. The obstacles are real, the challenges are significant, and there are legitimate questions about whether we have the assets to put together a competitive offer. But difficult doesn't mean impossible. And the fact that multiple league insiders have mentioned Los Angeles as a potential dark horse destination tells me there's at least a pathway here. There's at least a scenario where this could work. So let's talk about what it would take. Jake Fisher, who's one of the most plugged-in reporters covering the NBA, has been pretty skeptical about the Lakers' chances. He's pointed out that we simply don't have the draft capital that other teams can offer. He's noted that outside of Austin Reaves, we don't have the kind of young talent that typically headlines these blockbuster deals. And he's raised the very fair question of whether Milwaukee would view Reaves as the kind of perennial all-star caliber player that they could build around moving forward. But here's where I think the conventional wisdom might be missing something. Yes, we don't have a treasure trove of first-round picks. Yes, we don't have a roster full of 22-year-old prospects with sky-high ceilings. But we have something else. We have LeBron James. We have Anthony Davis. We have the Lakers brand, the Lakers history, the Lakers culture. And most importantly, we have the ability to offer Giannis something that Milwaukee can't, a legitimate immediate chance to compete for championships with multiple other superstars. Think about it from Giannis's perspective for a moment. He's 30 years old. He's in the absolute prime of his career. He's putting up MVP-caliber numbers, averaging 30.6 points, 10.7 rebounds, and 4 assists, while shooting 64% from the field. Those are video game numbers. But what does he have to show for it this season? The Bucks are struggling. They're not the championship contender they were a few years ago. And Giannis has to be looking around the league, seeing teams like the Celtics and the Thunder and the Nuggets, and wondering if he's wasting his prime years in a situation that's not maximizing his championship potential. Now, imagine you're Giannis and you get a call from the Lakers. Imagine Rob Pelinka laying out a vision where you're playing alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Imagine having 2 other legitimate superstars who can take pressure off you, who can create easier shots for you, who can help carry the load on both ends of the floor. Imagine playing in Los Angeles in front of the most passionate fan base in basketball with a chance to add your name to the pantheon of Lakers legends. That's a pretty compelling pitch. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of how a trade like this could actually work. The most commonly discussed framework involves Austin Reaves being the centerpiece going back to Milwaukee. And I know that's going to be controversial. I know Reaves has become a fan favorite. I know he's developed into a really solid player who fits perfectly with LeBron and AD. But we need to be realistic about what it takes to acquire a player of Giannis Antetokounmpo's caliber. You don't get a 2-time MVP without giving up significant value in return. The question that Fisher raised, and it's a legitimate one, is whether Milwaukee would view Reaves as a franchise cornerstone. Is he a player they could build their entire future around? Is he someone who has the potential to develop into a perennial all-star? Because if the Bucks are trading Giannis, they're essentially blowing up their current core and starting over. They need to get back a player or players who can be the foundation of their next competitive window. And here's where I think the case for Reaves is actually stronger than people realize. Yes, he's not a 20-year-old lottery pick with unlimited upside. But he's also proven that he can perform on the biggest stages. He's shown that he can play winning basketball alongside superstars. He's demonstrated legitimate two-way ability, playmaking skills, and clutch gene. At 25 years old, he's still got room to grow, and in a featured role where he's the primary option rather than the third or fourth option, who knows what his ceiling could be. But Reaves alone wouldn't be enough. The Lakers would need to include additional pieces. We'd likely have to part with multiple first-round picks, which, given our lack of draft capital, is already challenging. We'd probably need to include some combination of our other young players and rotation pieces, and we'd have to take on Giannis's contract, which is substantial but absolutely worth it for a player of his caliber. Here's the financial reality. Giannis is making about $48 million this season, and his contract runs through the 2027-28 season with a player option. That's a massive commitment but it's also the going rate for a top 5 player in the league. And when you consider what we're paying LeBron and AD already, adding Giannis would create one of the most expensive rosters in NBA history. But if there's any organization that can handle that financial burden, if there's any market that can support that kind of payroll through revenue and sponsorships, it's the Los Angeles Lakers. Now let's talk about fit, because that's crucial. How would Giannis actually work alongside LeBron and AD? Well, the first thing to understand is that all three of these players are incredibly versatile. Giannis can play anywhere from the 3 to the 5. AD is most comfortable at the 4, but can play the 5 in smaller lineups. LeBron, at this stage of his career, is basically positionless, capable of playing and defending multiple spots. The versatility alone would give head coach J.J. Redick an incredible amount of lineup flexibility. Offensively, the fit is actually better than people might think. Yes, Giannis isn't a great three-point shooter, and neither is AD particularly comfortable living beyond the arc. But Giannis's ability to attack the rim, to finish in traffic, to create advantages through his sheer physical dominance would open up so much space for everyone else. Teams couldn't pack the paint against him because they'd have to respect LeBron and whatever shooters we have on the perimeter. And in transition? Forget about it. Giannis running the floor with LeBron pushing the pace would be absolutely unstoppable. Defensively, this is where things get really exciting. Imagine a front court of Giannis and AD, two 7-footers who can switch onto guards, who can protect the rim, who can guard multiple positions. That's the kind of defensive versatility that wins championships in today's NBA. Teams wouldn't know how to attack us. Do you try to go small and get killed on the boards? Do you go big and get torched in space? There's no good answer when you're facing that kind of defensive length and athleticism. But I want to address the elephant in the room, which is Giannis's recent injury. He's currently dealing with a calf strain that's expected to keep him out for another 2 to 4 weeks. He's already missed 6 games this season. For a team considering trading significant assets for him, that's a legitimate concern. You're giving up your future for a player who needs to be healthy and available to make the investment worthwhile. However, I'd argue that the injury actually creates an opportunity. If teams are scared off by the injury, if it dampens the bidding war, that could work in the Lakers' favor. It might lower the asking price just enough to make a deal feasible with our limited assets. And when you look at Giannis's overall track record, he's been remarkably durable throughout his career. This isn't a player with a long history of soft tissue injuries or chronic problems. This seems like a relatively minor setback that he'll bounce back from. Let's also talk about the competition for Giannis's services, because that's a huge factor in whether the Lakers can realistically pull this off. The Knicks are reportedly the favorites, and it's not hard to see why. They've got a ton of draft picks from the Donovan Mitchell trade and other moves. They've got young players like Quentin Grimes and Emmanuel Quickley who could be included. They're in a major market, they're on the rise, and they could offer Giannis a chance to be the undisputed alpha on a contending team. The Spurs are another interesting option. Pairing Giannis with Victor Wembanyama would create perhaps the most dominant frontcourt in NBA history. Two 7-footers who can do everything, who can guard anyone, who would terrorize opponents on both ends. San Antonio has draft capital. They have young talent, and they have arguably the best coach in basketball in Greg Popovich. That's a compelling package. But here's what the Lakers have that those teams don't: immediate championship equity. The Knicks are good, but are they beating the Celtics in a 7-game series? The Spurs are building something special, but Wembanyama is still just 20 years old and probably a few years away from his prime. If Giannis wants to win championships right now, if he wants to maximize the remaining years of his prime, the Lakers with LeBron and AD give him the best chance to do that. And let's not underestimate the appeal of playing in Los Angeles. This is still the premier destination in the NBA. This is where legends are made, where legacies are cemented, where the brightest lights shine. Giannis has spent his entire career in Milwaukee, which is a great city, but doesn't have the same cultural cash or global platform that Los Angeles offers. For a player of his stature who's thinking about his brand, his business interests, his life after basketball, LA makes a lot of sense. There's also the coaching factor to consider. J.J. Redick is in his first year as head coach, but he's already shown that he has the basketball IQ and the communication skills to maximize talent. He played with LeBron, he understands how to build systems around superstars, and his analytical approach to the game would mesh perfectly with Giannis's skill set. Compare that to Doc Rivers in Milwaukee, who's been solid but hasn't exactly covered himself in glory during his tenure with the Bucks. Now, I want to be realistic about the timeline here. The trade deadline is February 5th, which is coming up fast. For a deal of this magnitude to happen, there would need to be serious conversations happening right now. Rob Pelinka would need to be working the phones, exploring frameworks, figuring out what combination of assets would get Milwaukee to the table. And on the Bucks side, they'd need to make the incredibly difficult decision to move on from the greatest player in franchise history. My gut feeling is that a trade before the deadline is unlikely, but not impossible. These kinds of blockbuster deals often take time to develop. They require multiple conversations, negotiations, adjustments to the framework. What's more likely is that if Giannis truly wants out, if he makes it clear to Milwaukee that he's not signing an extension and that he wants to be traded, we could see movement this summer when teams have more time to construct offers and figure out the financial implications. But the Lakers need to be aggressive right now in laying the groundwork. Even if a deal doesn't happen before the deadline, we need to be in Giannis's ear. We need to be making our pitch. We need to be positioning ourselves as the destination of choice if and when he decides to move on from Milwaukee. Because in the NBA, these things often come down to player preference. If Giannis says he wants to be a Laker, that gives us enormous leverage in trade negotiations. Let me also address a concern I know some of you have. What happens to our depth if we trade multiple players and picks for Giannis? It's a valid question. We'd likely be left with a top-heavy roster, 3 superstars surrounded by minimum contract players and whatever veterans we can attract with our mid-level exception. But here's the thing. In the playoffs, depth matters less than top-end talent. You need 7 or 8 guys you can trust, and if 3 of those guys are LeBron, AD, and Giannis, you're going to be in great shape. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, because this is the kind of decision that could define the next era of Lakers basketball. And make sure you're subscribed to Lakers News Fan Report and hit that notification bell, because I'm going to be all over this story as it develops. If there are any new updates, any breaking news, any insider information about Giannis and the Lakers, you're going to hear it here first. Share this video with every Lakers fan you know, because we need to be having this conversation as a community. I'll be back soon with more exclusive analysis, more breaking news, and more in-depth coverage of everything Lakers. Until then, keep the faith, keep believing, and let's see if we can make some magic happen. Go, Lakers!